So if you have the ability, go ahead and start posting in chat. So I see Julie from Michigan. All right. Got Dallas, Los Angeles. Wow, it's all over the place. We got folks from Canada. Looks like folks from Australia, Turkey, England, Netherlands, Israel. Wow. I always love this. We pretty much, most of our webinars, we tend to hit all the way across the globe, which is pretty cool. I see New Zealand was in there. Nice. Venezuela, good. We got some South American contingent. South Africa is here as well.
Saw Nairobi flash
Yeah,
by.
Nairobi. Yeah, exactly. See Johannesburg. Very cool. All right, yeah. I think we pretty much almost hit every continent. It's besides, I'll be surprised the day when we get somebody from Antarctica pops into our screen. That'll be a first. We're like, all right, we made the big time if we get Antarctic crew, the scientists down there. All right, I think we have enough time gone by to let's go ahead and start this webinar. So Alex, if you want to go ahead and go to the next slide, please. Okay, so today's topics, I'm gonna do an introduction of the panel, and then this will be the folks that are going to be presenting and talking through our Q&A sessions. And then we have a quick audience poll that we'll go ahead and institute. And then we have a presentation, kind of our guest speaker today from Nicolas Netien, and he'll talk about his projects and what he's working on. And then we'll before we move into our Q&A session, we'll talk about the Soil Food Web training program and the current offer that we have that's running through October 21st. And then we'll get into our Q&A session. And this is a good opportunity for you folks to be able to ask questions of us and the panel and some of the content that we talked about today. We're expecting that today's webinar is going to run about 105 minutes. So it's, getting close to between 1.5 hours and 2 hours. Okay, next slide, please. So we do have some webinar rules of engagement, and just because we have so many folks, I mean, we're already up to around 280 people attending. We do make sure that everybody who's not a panelist will stay in muted mode for the duration of the call, just to make sure we get really good audio quality. And then as we are going along the webinar and you have questions that you'd like to be answered, there is a Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and that way you can post your questions. Now, if you just want to have general chat with other attendees in the Zoom, then please use the chat button. The Q&A button should be used for questions that you want panelists to be able to answer, and just general chat should be done inside the chat window. Okay, next slide, please. So today's panelists, we have Dr. Elaine Ingham. I'm sure that's the reason why most of you folks are here. She's the founder of the Soil Food Web School and been a source of inspiration and knowledge for all of us that are doing this kind of work. We've got Nicolas Netien, and he is the general manager of BioSolia, and he's a regenerative ag expert, and Nicolas is going to be going through a presentation. We've got Keisha Wheeler. She's one of the founders of the Catalyst Bio Amendments and is a commercial compost producer, makes fantastic compost. My clients are very happy because of her compost that she makes. And then for me, I am Brian Vag. I am a Soil Food Web consultant. I own a company called Sprouting Soil, and I'm currently based out of Northern California. So we're going to spend a little bit more time getting to know Elaine and Nick. So next slide, please. Elaine, I'm going to hand this over to you to kind of talk about your background and your history. Oh, Elaine, you're on mute.
I'm going to get unmuted. Yeah. So as all those names were flashing by and where they're from, there were quite a few people from Minnesota, and that's where I am from. I grew up in the Twin Cities. My father was a veterinarian, so he was always taking me out on to farm with him, and large herds of cows were typically what he was looking at. And so I started to learn a lot about the soil and, some observations about the soil. When I was about 6 years old, my father had to babysit me. So he, took me into the lab, his lab back at the University of Minnesota. And when I was 6 years old, he sat me down and taught me how to use a microscope. And I think I got well bitten by that microscope bug. because I have worked with microscopes pretty much the rest of my life. Working, when I was doing my PhD, was working on a method for being able to differentiate between active fungi versus total fungal biomass, active bacteria versus total, and how the active sets of organisms are always much, much less than what you see when you do a total. So most of the time in the soil, the organisms are going to be waiting for the right set of conditions for their enzymes, their way of dealing with the world to exist. And then they do their job. They do their job for as long as the conditions are correct for them to be active, and then they go back to sleep. So starting to learn a lot of those different kinds of things, going through, well, where I grew up in Minnesota. I did do a year abroad at Cambridge University when I was a sophomore in college. And that was quite a learning curve, being in a whole different country. When I was a child, 11 and a half years old, my father went on sabbatical. So I was down in Colombia. So I have experiences there. And that served me well as being able to go into any ecosystem, any country around the world, and recognize what is the same, and then what are the subtle differences. And how is the biology going to change? How are the overarching principles going to get interpreted for this place, for Sri Lanka, or for the Philippines, or for Brazil, or Tierra del Fuego, or over in Europe, any one of those countries, South Africa. I think the only continent I have not managed to make it to is Greenland. And there's not that much agriculture in Greenland, you know, so maybe that's not a surprise. Certainly not a surprise that I've not spent time in the Antarctic either. So we have done samples, a number of samples in the Antarctic, sorry. But you know, not there. Well, you know, it's not a really friendly place to hang out. So a lot of experience around the world, so we understand how to interpret the data for everybody around the world. So now at the school, working on ways of easily and pleasantly fun ways of learning the lessons that we need to learn about biology in the soil. And we really hope that you will come join us for the foundation classes, where we set forth all of the theory and then the practical applications for making compost teas and extracts. And then how do you know that your soil is really bad, that maybe you shouldn't even call it soil, and you've got to have a microscope. So we teach you how to use that microscope. How do you know when your compost is going to be chock full of the organisms that you need to put into your soil? Maybe it's dirt, but bring those organisms back, get them reestablished and get them functioning. How do you do that as rapidly as possible? So we always try to make certain that within one growing season, one growing cycle, we can get that biology back into your soil, and you can see all of the benefits. We don't want to go after just one benefit. We want to go after all of them. So by the end of that growing season, you have all of the benefits possible. If you don't follow instructions, if you don't pay attention to Mother Nature or to us, then you're not going to meet that goal. I can guarantee that for you. So there's a learning curve, and it's good to go through this process several times with case studies, for example, working with your mentor. So hopefully you'll be interested in coming on board and start to learn all about this great information.
Great, thanks, Elaine. Now we'll hand it over to Nicolas. Next slide to Alex. And Nicolas, you want to give us your background?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm trained as an environmental engineer, and my first jobs were in waste management, and especially organic waste management. And I came across permaculture when I was in Australia. I'm originally from France. And when I first see my first permaculture farm, it was kind of a click, and the holistic approach and the interconnections between all the elements of the farm really made sense to me. You know, for me, it was like, okay, this is common sense. So then I pursued an education in permaculture in New Zealand with the late Joe Polisher, with Darren Doherty, with Griffin Hope, who is now in Chile. And then I kept on going, and I met Paul Taylor, the late Paul Taylor, who was a student of Elaine, and he gave me Soil Biology Primer, the book. So that also made a lot of sense in that, you know, it was a rabbit hole. And since then, that was about 15 years ago, I've been working on permaculture framework, regenerative agriculture, making a lot of compost, and a lot of different experiments. Life brought me to desertic areas, and in the Middle East, and in Greece, and now in Cyprus. And I like desertic areas because, you know, the tougher the situation, the less options you have. And I'm quite a lazy designer, so when you don't have many options in life, it's easier. So I've been working in Cyprus on an olive project that I will present today. And now I'm working with other different types of projects that I will explain in a little bit during my presentation.
Great. Thanks, Nicholas. Thanks, Elaine and Nicholas, for giving you guys a background. And before we move on, I also forgot to mention that everybody should congratulate Keisha and her partner Casey on passing and getting their certified consultants. So yay, Keisha. Okay, next slide, please. So we'd like to actually ask a question of you folks. We're going to launch a poll. It'll be up for about 30 seconds or so. And if you guys go ahead and launch the poll. So the poll is, which of the following best describes you? If both, please choose option A, and it's farmer or ag professional or environmental advocate. And we ask this question of all of our webinars, and it's really curious to see kind of where the folks are coming from. I think on average, we have more people coming from the farmer, growing, or ag professional, environmental advocate, but I think it's more like a 60-40, 65-35 kind of split. Okay, so let's go ahead, and while you guys are filling out the poll, let's go ahead and move on, and we're going to have a presentation from Nicholas. So I think we're going to go ahead and have you, Nicholas, go ahead and share out your screen.
Okay. It says that you disable participant screen sharing.
We'll fix that in just a second. Sammy or Alex, if you guys can allow Nicholas to share.
Let me know when you're ready.
Hey, Nicholas, I just asked you to become a co-host, so accept that and then see if it'll let you screen share.
All right, Nicholas, we can see what you're sharing. Take it away.
All right, so when I was introducing myself, I said that I'm now in Cyprus. I've been here for 8 years now, and I was brought in Cyprus for a job, which was to design an olive grove from scratch in the UN buffer zone. And it was my first job. There's a poll coming up.
There you go.
It was my first job with olives. And olives is the most cultivated tree crop in the world. There's about 10 million hectares, so that's about 25 million acres of olive groves around the world. And here you can see where they are, usually in the Mediterranean climate, but now they are growing in much more different areas. China is planting a lot of trees now. So Olives is pretty resilient. It can grow in many different types of climate, and now with the climate warming, we can grow in even higher and lower altitudes in areas. In EU alone, is about 2 million farmers that are farming olives. It's a very fraudulent market. About 70% of the olive oil which is sold as extra virgin is not extra virgin, and so it's a very difficult market to penetrate if you do quality and not quantity. Spain is dominating the market, the main country that is growing, and in Europe we have a health claim. If your olive oil is rich in polyphenol, and if it has more than 250 milligrams of polyphenol per liter, you can write on the bottle that this olive oil will lower your bad cholesterol. So effectively, a doctor in Europe can prescribe high-phenolic olive oil instead of statin medication for your cholesterol. There's many health benefits of high-phenolic olive oil, and there's a World Olive Center for Health, which is run by a Greek couple, Dr. Meliou and Mayatis, and they found a way to analyze olive oil and analyze the different phenols separately, the different polyphenols separately, using NMR method, nuclear magnetic resonance. And since they discovered that method, it really allowed a lot of research to happen, because we can isolate easier all the different types of phenols and identify their health benefit. There's just a clinical trial that came out on Alzheimer. It's protective against Alzheimer. It's called medical food, but the health benefits are directly related to the polyphenol content of the oil. So for a grower, it's very important to maximize the polyphenol content. Also, the polyphenols are like the protective immune system, if you want, of the fruit. So when you have a higher polyphenol content, you're less likely to be bitten by pests. And so I just took a screenshot from PubMed, which is medical publication, and you can see the interest growing in medical research on olive oil. We have these days 12,600 papers on olive oil. So there's a huge growing interest and a huge growing in quality olive oil now. People are looking for polyphenol, which we didn't know a few years back. One of these polyphenol is called oleocanthal, and that's the one which is the most sought after. It's the one that will burn the back of your throat if you eat a good olive oil. And it was discovered in 2005 only by Dr. Beauchamp. And Dr. Beauchamp was working with ibuprofen at the time. And he went on to a trip in Spain, and then he had some fresh olive oil at his throat. He said, oh, that's the same taste than ibuprofen. And then he started looking for it and identify it. And it happens that oleocanthal has the same property than ibuprofen. It's anti-inflammatory, inhibitor of COX-1 and 2, but you don't have the side effects, and you don't have, you can take much higher dosage if you have access to olive oil that has high content of it. So this is the olive oil that we did in 2017-18. That's the highest. That's when I don't have after that, because in 2019 I left the farm to work on another project. But that's the world highest content of polyphenol ever achieved. So you have a total of 4,947 milligrams and a total of oleocanthal of 3,762 milligrams. Just to put this in perspective, the EU health claim starts at 250 milligrams. Before this record, the total oleocanthal ever recorded was 900 milligrams. So we're 20 times over the health claim. So instead of taking the 20 grams per day of olive oil that the health claim tells you to for the cholesterol, you can take 1 gram. That's a tiny drop of olive oil. And this amount of oleocanthal, so if you take a teaspoon of it, it's equivalent of 700 milligrams of ibuprofen. And you don't have pills of 700 milligrams. The maximum you can get is 450. So with one teaspoon of that, you have a huge anti-inflammatory effect without the side effects. And so it's a natural anti-inflammatory, protective against Alzheimer, and there is a huge list of health benefits. You can do a bit of Google search, you'll find tons of paper coming up. So we 28 times higher in yellow content than the average of olive oil. So we did something right. And what we did right is to work with the right biology. So that's the oil as it's sold now. It's registered as a health food complement. It's not sold as table olive oil. So the highest content, which is the gold edition, sells at 600 euros a liter. And then it goes, I think, 200 for the silver, and the table olive oil is still around 30, 40 euros a liter. So it's a good amount of money for an olive oil. So it comes from this island, Cyprus, which is in the European Union, but in the Middle East. We're just off the coast of Turkey, and we're 60 kilometers away from the coast of Syria. So it's right there in the Middle East. You can see right in the middle, there's a mountain range, the Troodos mountain range, that goes up to over 2,000 meters high. I'm sorry about using a metric system for listeners.
It's okay.
I don't have the conversion with me. But it's quite high, and it really is the green area of the island. The rest of the island, 51% of the island, is in critical danger of desertification, according to the latest report. This island has a very long history. It's been occupied for a very, very long time by people. Very, very long time ago, it used to be very, very green with dwarf hippopotamus, elephants, and swamps everywhere. And the water actually stayed until the antiquity. The first description that we have from historian from the antiquity describes basically a really big swamp with water everywhere. And then during the Bronze Age, the Egyptians discovered copper, and the name Cyprus comes from the term copper in Greek, basically. So they started mining copper. And to mine copper, you need to make big fires. And to make big fires, you need to cut down trees. And slowly, slowly, they cut down the forest of Cyprus, and it turned into almost a desert, basically. It's an island which is cut in half. It got its independence in the 50s in the 1960s, sorry, from the British. And then clash of our communities. There's two main communities in the island, the Greek and the Turkish communities. And in 1974, there was an invasion by mainland Turkey, and since the island has been separated, and there's a United Nations keeping the peace, and there's a buffer zone between the north and the south of the island, which was unoccupied since 74 until 2003, when farming was authorized. But it's still under UN jurisdiction. You need to go through UN process to be able to enter the zone. This is the general area where the farm is located. So it's in what we call the Morph Bay, and you see those two lines, those two red lines in between the UN buffer zone. This is the land when we arrived, basically a desert. It was run by goats, and it was farmed, and it still is for most of it, farmed for subsidies, meaning that there's a European subsidies that if you till the land, you get money for it. It's not related to the production or anything like this. The spirit of the subsidies is actually pretty good, is to prevent farming land to become something else, to preserve farming land. But this was not farming land. It was basically brittle environment, brittle brush. And big tractors came in, start tilling everything, burning down whatever there was as vegetation, which basically, some bushes, thyme, sisyphus, very few trees, and everything was tilled to the rock, basically. Sometimes they don't even sow wheat. Sometimes they do, but they have a very poor harvest, but they don't care because the money comes from the subsidies. This is the farm at the beginning. I will come in a little bit on this water harvesting lake that we designed. Now that's the farm a bit more recently. It's about 40 hectares, and there is about 8,000 olive trees now, many pomegranates, many Mosphilia, which is a crataceous berry tree. There's a lot of prickly pears and a lot of different aromatic plants as well. So that's how it looks like when you enter. You enter the UN buffer zone. It used to be landmines, but now it's been clear. Well, we hope, and you need a special permit to enter it, and that's what we worked with. So that's basically a cut that we did. So maybe 1 centimeter of topsoil when you're lucky, and the rest is just rock. And that rock is quite special. It's an upper pillow lava, so it's actually full of minerals, but not in a chemical form which is accessible for the plants. So you can have iron deficiency, and this soil is full of iron. So if you plant pomegranate, for example, in there, which they need iron, they will show directly iron deficiency in the soil, which is full of iron. So how do you unlock that potential? So what we did is that, everywhere was just full of rocks, and because we wanted to be able to plant a ground cover, to be able to graze eventually, we just started collecting those rocks and placing them in the right places to slow down the flow of water. So what was a problem became a solution. So we started making these rough gabions and check dams everywhere. We try to put them on contour. The trees are planted in line because when you have 8,000 trees and you need to prune and harvest, you really want to be able to work with lines. Prickly pears as fire breaks as well. And what we noticed is that, of course, it slows down the water and, it gets greener behind. But that's in the summer. So you have growth in those, you have green in those erosion gullies that are now slowing down, absorbing the water. So that's very helpful for us because that host of many insects and rabbits and other wildlife, which is actually very useful for our system, which I will explain in a bit why. And so same here. So we didn't plant everything. We're still in the plantation process. So that's in year 1 in the summer. It's already a big difference just by putting the right stones at the right place. And then you have soil creation. If you have water and no disturbance, and of course a little bit of compost and inoculation, I'll come back to that in a bit, then the soil creates fast because you have a really long growing season in Cyprus. And so what we noticed is that if you just stack some stones like that, like we do in the gabions and the check dams, in the morning the birds will come and sit on it. And when they come and sit on it, they poo. And when they poo, they spread seeds, because most of the wild plants that we have in the area, the seeds are designed to go through the digestive system of the bird and give the best chances. So we actually place the birds in our system. And they started planting this, which is wild asparagus, which is big delicacy here. And people pay a lot of money for that wild asparagus. And they're quite rare, but we started seeing them popping up everywhere we had stones. So a small change actually create many different benefits. So these check dams in the winter, because the rain pattern in Cyprus has changed over the last 30 years. We lost 20% of rain. In this area, we get 200 millimeters of rain per year. We get 47 Celsius in the summer, and so it's really, really hot. We have 6 months, 8 months with no rain, and actually our second year we had no rain at all for 12 months. But when it rains, it pours. It's a pattern that has changed. It used to be 4 months of steady rain and then the summer, but now it's a little bit less rain, but fewer rain events that are really, really heavy. So you really want to be able to slow down that flow of water. So those things really fill up with just one rain. And then, of course, we didn't disturb any of the existing vegetation because they are very useful to us. In the background here, you have the main bush here is a Sisyphus. So that Sisyphus, which you see everywhere in the desert, they have a huge taproot that will go really deep and find the humidity and then pump it up. That's what plants do. And when it pumps it up, it sweats it a little bit and then creates a little microclimate there with a little bit of humidity, and then other plants can come in, and then again the asparagus here, and then you create this little microclimate. So every plant for us is very important. So we plant directly into the vegetation. That's a pomegranate. You see that you have wild thyme around it. We didn't disturb anything. And then of course we needed water because at that time we had no source of water. We had a little borehole. We don't want to use borehole because that's what everyone does in Cyprus. And everyone has been pumping and pumping water. And now people are starting to make a huge issue because that water it's fossil water. It's 40, 50, 100,000 years old. And it's not replenishing from the top because the forests are gone. So they are pumping finite stock that will stop. And in some places in the north, the water pressure changed in the aquifer and the seawater came in. And then they started watering their crop with seawater. And when it's not seawater, it's the bottom of the aquifer, which is already salty and really poor quality. So because the land is so degraded around us, it has a high runoff. So that's a good thing for us. So we're capturing a lot of water. So before we planted the tree, we planted the water. So the water access structure, always in that order before we plant anything. And so we designed this water harvesting lake, which is 17,000 cubic meter of water, which it's enough to cover the irrigation needs of the entire farm for a year. And actually, we're using far less now. I'll explain how. And so every single structure, every road that was put in captures water, and then we're capturing also, we have a watershed on top with this brittle land with high runoff. So we're actually filling that pond. And we also added, of course, biology in it. We added fish, we added things. Now there's more plant growing in these pictures in the early stages. And this water, before going in, goes to a little silt pond, which I designed to be twice the size of the bucket of the tractor, with a little slope. So we're collecting really nice topsoil there and really nice silt that we're replacing in different places, or we're using it for potting mix. So the neighbors giving us a lot of soil. And then, of course, we saw a lot of ground covers. We try to find leguminous nitrogen fixing plants that are drought resistant. So there's a seed bank in the Agricultural Research Institute in Cyprus, and they were very nice and giving us a lot of seeds, and we started multiplying them. And that's Medicagos scutellata, I think. And so it's a wild alfalfa, if you like. So that's a nitrogen fixing plant. Then we started planting other wild plants, and that's Litrichia viscosa. And the purpose of that bush is to host beneficial insects. the main issues that you have with olive is the olive fly. That's your number one pest. The farmer has never been sprayed for olive fly. There's no need for it. Some tramping has been done in the bad years, but it was never sprayed. Organic, of course, the farm is organic, but you can spray organic pesticides. The idea is to not have any pesticide, organic or not. And the reason why we don't have to spray is this little guy. So it's a parasitic wasp. It's a Pelmus urozonus, and he lives in the little plant that you've seen before. That's so by multiplying the wild areas and multiplying those little pockets of completely wild places, we created all these habitats, and then you have what we call integrated pest control. And then, of course, we started making compost. And we start seeing mushrooms popping everywhere. We started making compost to start the biology of the soil, because we have these incredible minerals, but no access to the plant. So you need to have those little microbes to do the bridge between the soil and the plants. And just like in our body, the plants need a good microbiome to grow healthy. And so we did compost, but the compost is not food for the olive trees. It's very important to realize that, because if I was giving compost every year to every olive tree, I will have a very happy olive tree. A very happy olive tree grows and does not make any olives. So the nitrogen intake for an olive tree is very tricky. And the compost has been used for inoculation. It's been used in the soil in different places. We tried many different ways to do it, drilling holes, putting compost in at different distances of the roots. And of course, we put compost in the wild areas too. And we inoculated with mycorrhizae, of course, every tree. And it really started kicking out, and it's really fast. It's really, really fast. The first year, we could see, because we tested everything. I divided the first plot in seven stations with 7 irrigation. We got students from the Panelist College, the American farming school of Thessaloniki. We had a student from Yale Environmental School, School of Public Health. Sorry. So we measured everything, and it was incredible. We measure production, we measure irrigation needs, and we measure the quality, meaning the polyphenol content. You can measure the quality of olive oil chemically, which is quite useful. It's not just the palette; it's you have data, and yeah, when you put a little bit of biology, you increase the quality and you increase the quantity and you decrease the water need. And that's, when you don't have water, that's crucial. And we're actually using 5 times less water than the recommendation of the Ministry of Agriculture in Cyprus for olive oil. So biology is key, and it's actually not that difficult. And then we got our hands in a much different grove. That grove, it's really old, the oldest tree, 900 years old. It's a few kilometers away. And in that grove was tilled every year, because there's a belief that if you till the ground, you will have less olive fly, because when the olive fly is in a pupa stage, it stays in the ground. But actually, many studies have been disproving that, but it's a common belief still in Cyprus. So it was still for many, many years. It was organic though. And then we took over and we just stopped tilling and we brought animals in it. There's a farmer close by that has a donkey and cows. The traditional Cypriot cows is one of the last guy to have them. And we started crash grazing basically. And this one has 0 irrigation. There's no irrigation system inside. And here you have in July, so the last rain was probably 3 months before that. In July, it's over 40 Celsius during the day, and you still have green. And here, yeah, of course, here we put a lot of compost and compost. So it's all about symbiotic relationships and trade. That's, you know, that what I learned from Elaine work. And, you know, I'm not gonna speak too much in front of the master today. But, you know, one of the major differences that we've seen is the trees that were inoculated with the mycorrhizae really improved quality, quantity, and water resilience. So the mycorrhizae, I'm sure, maybe I'll explain a little bit. It extends the root system, basically. It will go and fetch food and water for the tree, and in exchange, the tree will feed it little sugars and makes photosynthesis. And the key is really complexity, and it's true for every ecosystem. And, you know, the most important ecosystem is below our feet. So this is the first one you need to get right. So the benefit of complexity is like nutrient cycling, retention, improved structure, infiltration, and water holding capacity. That's very, very, very important, because when you have water, then you have biology. So it's a virtuous cycle. So when you start having increasing your water holding capacity, then you increase your biology, and you know it gets better and better, and it's exponential. And then disease suppression. You have the disease of the soil, but you also improve the immune system of the plant. And then degradation, pollutants. There's many bioremediation in degradation. So the principles, and that's all the Elaine work: population number, complex diversity, that drives your functions, moisture, and fertility. It needs to be living, and to be living, it needs to be covered. So we achieve all this with minimal mechanization. That's a tractor. It's a turbo loader, and it's very, very small for that size. It's against the tradition in farming, where you get the biggest tractor you can. And in EU, it's easy to get a big tractor because it goes this way. And actually, for many years, agriculture policies will tend to push you to mechanize, to have more and more and bigger tractor. And there's the neighbor of the farm has 300 goats and 5 tractors, and he's $500,000 in debt. And, you know, it's not his fault. It's the system who pushed him to do that. So we decided to go minimal. And this little thing that has a lot of add-ons, you know, I put a fork to turn compost, there's a drill to plant the trees, there's a thing to cut the ground cover, there's a bucket, there's many, many different add-ons. So a small little tractor, that's all you need for 8,000 trees. And then, of course, there's the milling. If you have the olives right, you don't want to mess on the milling. So once again, I don't believe in big infrastructure. So because we are harvesting and we're milling as we go, we don't need to have big machines. So that's a small machine. It goes 200 kilos an hour. But if you harvest 200 kilos in an hour, it's already pretty good. And that's what you need. And of course, I did some little modifications on it. Some of the phenols, like the oleocanthal, they don't exist in the fruit as such. They are transformed during the milling process. It's like a little bioreactor. So there's a chemical reaction there, and to get this oleocanthal. And we figure it out, you know, the best way to do it. So with the right amount of oxygen and carbon dioxide, etc., at the right time, the right temperature. So a lot of experiment there as well. And that creates that oil, really, really green and really, really strong. So it's not the oil you will drizzle on your salad, it's the oil that you will take a few grams a day. So that's the color of it. And now, so I left the farm about 2 years ago, I still answer the phone when they call and ask. I left with a manual, so the farm now is going to introduce mini cows in crash grazing, hopefully, to speed up even more the biological process. So now I'm working in a complete different environment. So now I'm 900 meters up in the Troodos mountain. And here we have pretty much an issue in Troodos. It's a monoculture of pine trees. That was reforestation that happened about 100 years ago. And the pine tree is very invasive and it burns, you know. And we had this year one of massive fire again. And we had one a few years back. So we're getting more and more fires. So in that project, we planted a botanical park, about 10 hectares. And we're also working with stones, gabions, and we are planting many different types of species because we make honey. That's our main product. And we have vertically integrated operation where we breed our own queens. Our beekeeper has 30 years of experience of breeding his own queens. He's been in Cyprus all that time. He's French as well. We work with no protection gear because we have very gentle bees. We're working on the resistance to disease through the breeding as well. And we created that honey. So this year our second harvest. And we want to be able to finance this whole project using the main resource of Cyprus, which is tourism. There's less than 1 million of us, but there's about 4 million tourists coming. And we say, okay, how we can turn this very strong environmental impact of tourism into something beneficial for the environment. So we are designing an ecology with very little impact and natural ways of cooling. And we're using this as an example and a way to finance the rest of the project, which is trying out new forestation techniques, doing a research lab, etc., etc. Basically showing and teaching environmental sustainability. And we are in the process of proposing a school of sustainable agriculture to be a part of the University of Cyprus, where we can open a lab to offer technical support to farmers, which they don't have at the moment. It's a catastrophe farming in Cyprus. We're the #1 country in the world for antibiotic use in animal farming. We use chemicals all over the place with no training, no protection. It's a public health disaster and an environmental disaster. So we want to be able to provide technical support to farmers like soil analysis, leaf analysis, education. And to help us in that project, we're working with Traceability, which is a tech company based in Spain. And we are using blockchain traceability. We are in the process of developing a full traceability system for our honey. Because, you know, I told you at the beginning that the two most fraudulent food in the world, #1 olive oil, #2 honey. And so when you do things right and you produce the good stuff and you end up on the shelves next to the guy who's not producing the good stuff, you know, it's basically syrup. And when it comes to honey, you want to be able to show that you're producing the good stuff. And we believe in traceability and full transparency. We're publishing all our analysis. You can know where your honey coming from, what's in it, that there's no chemicals in it, it's pure, etc., etc., etc. And we're using IoT, Internet of Things, good sensors into our operation system, so we can understand a little bit better how our bee behaves and the carrying capacity of the environment they are working in. And that's it for me. I think I was not too short, was it?
No, it's perfect. Thank you, Nicholas. It
Okay.
was fascinating, and I'm sure that you're going to generate a lot of questions. I already seen some of them come in through the Q&A. So, fantastic presentation, and I love the work that you're doing. So before we get into Q&A, though, if you can stop sharing, Nicholas, then we're going to have Alex go ahead and share
Yes.
back out. Fantastic. And I just wanted to mention to everybody, we're going to talk about the promotion for about the next 10-15 minutes. And while the promotion is going, if you have questions, especially things that may have sparked your interest through Nicholas's presentation, go ahead and click the QA button and try to make sure all the questions you want to have answered by panelists are in that QA section and not necessarily the chat. The chat's going to be more for just general communication with other folks. All right, if you want to go ahead and move on. Thanks, Alex. And so we're going to be talking about our promotion that we're running through October. And what's really exciting about this promotion is that we're offering a new track in our education series. And so we'll be introducing the BioComplete Compost Bundle. And this is going to be really geared towards farmers, ranchers, and growers. These are people who are actually producing products in the agricultural systems. And it will be tailored to your experiences as a grower, rancher, and a farmer. But we also have our traditional track, which is the Consultant Kickstarter Bundle. And again, that's going through the Consultants Training Program. And the nice thing, through October 21st, both these have really significant savings. We're knocking about 45% off. And we're going to show a quick 2 videos talking about the new BioComplete Compost Bundle and also about the Consultants Kickstarter Bundle, and gives you all the different programs that'll be offered inside that. So, all right, panelists, if you can, please go on mute. Alex, I think you're going to have to reshare it with the sound.
This October, we're presenting our biggest bundle ever with the biggest savings we've ever offered. With the BioComplete Compost Bundle, you can register for the Soil Food Web Foundation courses with Dr. Elaine Ingham for just $38.70, saving over $1,100 through October 21st. You'll also get Stage 1 of the Grower Training Program totally free, saving a further $15.40. That's 26 hours of mentor time dedicated to helping you make your own biological compost and develop your microscopy skills to the standard required to qualify as a certified Soil Food Web Lab technician. You'll also get 2 free bonuses with this offer: the Introduction to Permaculture course by Graham Bell and the all-new Soil Sponge Regeneration workshop with Dee Dee Purshouse, saving a further $500. This is the biggest discount bundle that we've ever offered, with a total value of over $7,000, for which you'll only pay $38.70, saving you a total of $31.70. That's 45% off. In Foundation Course 1, you'll take a deep dive into the science and methodology that underpins the Soil Food Web approach, which was developed by Dr. Elaine Ingham over the last 4 decades. You'll study the history of soil on planet Earth and how the agricultural practices we've been using in the last 100 years have degraded our soils to the point where we now only have around 60 harvests left, according to the United Nations. You'll learn about the solution to many of the problems that are familiar to farmers all over the world today. Problems like diminishing soil fertility, pest and disease pressure, low crop yields, drought, flooding, compaction, and soil erosion. Regenerative agriculture can address all of these problems. You'll be introduced to regenerative practices like no-till and the use of cover plants. You'll also learn about the 4 major groups of microorganisms that drive soil regeneration and how the process can be accelerated by restoring the microbial community, or soil food web, to your soils. Dr. Elaine will present a number of case studies from around the world that she has worked on personally. Here you'll see some of the amazing results that have been achieved using the soil food web approach.
In Foundation Course 2, you will learn all about the importance of biological compost and how it's very different to regular compost. When most people look at compost, they only see a means of delivering nutrients to their plants, so they think about how much nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, and other elements are in the compost. When we look at biological compost, we see a means of inoculating the soil with beneficial microorganisms so that the soil ecosystem can start to function again, providing plants with a continual supply of nutrients. This is kind of like teaching someone to fish so they can feed themselves for life, as opposed to just giving them a single meal. In this part of the training, you will learn how to make biological compost using various starting materials to create a recipe that will produce results. You'll learn how to monitor and control moisture levels, aeration, and temperature in order to ensure that beneficial microorganisms are multiplied, while disease-causing organisms are destroyed or become dormant. You'll also learn about the various types of equipment that can be used at different scales, and you'll learn about the different ways in which biological compost can be applied to the soil. In Foundation Course 3, you'll study Dr. Elaine's methods for making liquid biological soil amendments. Compost extracts are used as a soil drench, delivering microbes deep into the soil profile, where they can interact with the plant's root system. Compost teas are applied to the plant's foliage, where they form a protective barrier against foliar diseases. In time, as your soil biome becomes more diverse and vigorous, your plants and trees may be entirely covered with beneficial microbes without having to continually apply them.
In Foundation Course 4, you'll focus on 4 major groups of microorganisms in the soil food web: bacteria, fungi, protozoa, and nematodes. You'll learn how to use a compound microscope to identify and quantify these microbes so that you can really see what's going on in your compost and in the soil. This will give you the ability to assess the quality of your compost and liquid amendments before you invest all the time and effort that is required to apply them to the soil. You will also be able to monitor the progress of the microbial community in your soil over time, so if something is going wrong, you will know about it before the plants start to suffer. This gives you the opportunity to take remedial action early on in the growing season. Next, in Stage 1 of the Grower Training Program, you'll be assigned to one of our highly skilled mentors, some of whom are soil food web consultants who run their own businesses supporting farmers to make the transition to the soil food web approach. And others are PhD biologists who have been working closely with Dr. Ingham for several years. You'll work one-on-one with your mentor to develop your compost making and microscopy skills. When it comes to making great biological compost, there are many variables and every situation is different. Our mentors have worked with dozens of students making compost in many different conditions, so they'll be able to help you address some of these challenges that are unique to your location. They'll also guide you to avoid making common mistakes that can cost you lots of time, money, and effort. Your mentor will support you as you develop your skills to the required standard to pass the microscopy proficiency assessment. Achieving this standard will give you the confidence to really know what's happening in the microbial community in your compost and soil. You'll be able to perform an assessment of your soil in about an hour or less, so you won't need to rely on an external pass the microscopy proficiency assessment. You can elect to be listed on our website as a certified soil food web lab tech, which means that you can assess soil samples for other farmers and growers in your region.
You'll have a total of 26 hours of mentoring time, so you can arrange Zoom calls and exchange emails with your mentor whenever you feel you need support. Our mentors work together as a team, and there's a lot of diverse experience and knowledge between them, so you'll have access to a great deal of support. You'll also have access to the 2 bonus courses. In the Introduction to Permaculture course, you'll learn from internationally respected teacher, author, and lecturer in permaculture, Graham Bell. This is a series of 18 lectures and quizzes where you will take a deep dive into this amazing design system that can be applied when designing your home, garden, farm, business, or community. Permaculture is all about being in balance with the planet and is an ideal tool to have in your bag whenever you're considering making a change. The Soil Sponge Regeneration Workshop is delivered by educator and author Dee Pershaus. This 5-session course is all about regenerating the soil sponge for flood, drought, and wildfire resilience. It builds on the successes of innovative land managers around the world who are saving huge sums in damages from extreme weather events and crop diseases, while restoring the dignity and profitability of farming. Dee teaches participatory workshops both in person and online, helping to show the nested relationships between cycles and climate resiliency.
So just to recap, the BioComplete Compost Bundle comprises Soil Food Web Foundation courses with Dr. Elaine Ingham, where you get to study the theory and application methods behind the Soil Food Web approach, and that all-important 26 hours of mentor time in Stage 1 of the Grower Training Program designed to help you develop your compost making and microscopy skills. You'll also get the 2 free bonuses, Introduction to Permaculture course with Graham Bell and the Soil Sponge Regeneration Workshop with Dee Dee Pershaus. This bundle is ideal if you want to make your own biological compost and master the microscope. These are the skills that are most in demand amongst farmers who come to the Soil Food Web School. Once you have completed the foundation courses in Stage 1 of the Grower Training Program, you'll be well on your way to improved soil fertility, greater yields, and resilience to pests, diseases, drought, and flooding.
All right, and we're going to watch another video, and this one's going to focus on the consultants training program. So Alex, if you want to kick that one off.
Got an issue playing this video. We'll come back to it.
Sure. So if we get a chance at the end of the webinar today, we'll go ahead and show that video. If not, I think we'll have it online for you to be able to see. So, okay.
Okay.
Oh, you got it?
Yeah.
There we go. All right, we'll watch this.
This October, we're presenting our biggest bundle ever with the biggest savings we've ever offered. With the Consultant Kickstarter bundle, you can register for the Soil Food Web Foundation courses with Dr. Elaine Ingham for just $38.70, saving over $1,100 through October 21st. You'll also get Stage 1 of the Consultant Training Program totally free, saving a further $15.40. That's 26 hours of mentor time dedicated to helping you make your own biological compost and develop your microscopy skills to the standard required to qualify as a certified Soil Food Web Lab technician. You'll also get 2 free bonuses with this offer, the Introduction to Permaculture course by Graham Bell and the all-new Soil Sponge Regeneration Workshop with Dee Dee Pershaus, saving a further $500. This is the biggest discount bundle that we've ever offered with a total value of over $7,000, for which you'll only pay $38.70, saving you a total of $31.70. That's 45% off.
Okay, so we're going to move on into our Q&A session, and Alex, fantastic. Oh, so we're just going to go ahead and leave it here for the Q&A. We do have some additional webinars coming up, and we'll talk about those webinars at the end of the webinar today. So first question, and this question is going to be from Joe, and this is going to be geared towards Nicolas. And so the question is, how has Nicolas dealt with verticillium that has devastated the olive orchards throughout Spain and other areas of Europe? So it's kind of a question too. What's the disease and pest pressure situations you've had to deal with in your olive orchards?
Okay, verticillium, we didn't have any problem with it. For the reason that there was no olive trees where we came in, and we made sure to have trees that were free of it. And every time we work very cleanly. When we prune, we disinfect tools, so we're trying not to spread anything. But then, because we have a strong biology already, it's much more difficult for disease to come in. But so far, no issues with verticillium.
Yeah, and I would say, my experience in other nut crop and even olives grown here in California, that once you do have a very healthy soil food web, you tend to have a much stronger immune system response from the plants. And also, if we're using compost teas, which is a common practice that we use, to be able to provide a preventative barrier, essentially, from those fungal diseases from getting purchase on the surface of the leaves and then having issue with the plant. So, Elaine, Keisha, anything else you want to add?
I would just mimic what you said, Brian. As the biological numbers and diversity come up in the soil, we see diseases just kind of disappear and the plants get, more and more vital as time goes on.
It's the overarching principles that we've talked about that Nicolas has already demonstrated, where you get coverage of all parts of the plant below ground and above ground. And once you have that barrier in place, there is no way for the disease-causing organism to come in contact with the plant material. If you can't contact your victim, you're not going to have a problem. So we've got to get those things in place. It does take a little bit of time to get enough biology so that it's carried from the soil up into the top part of the plant. So those taxi cabs are critically important. You have to have some of the insect life to do that transport for you. So you don't want to be killing off all of your insects, which is what the pesticides tend to do. They take out the bad guys as well as the good. And sometimes they take out the beneficial organisms way more than they take out the disease and pests. So right at first, we're going to probably be teaching you how to make a compost tea that you spray on the foliage. So you make sure that all surfaces of your plant are covered even before you have everything perfected in the soil. So we have ways to mechanically get that biology on your leaf surfaces, but halfway through the first growing season, the biology in the soil should start being spread by the organisms that come in contact with the soil. So every time that bird lands on your soil and walks around and then flies up into your tree, it's spreading that biology. And the plant is putting out exudates to grow that biology. So if you can get any kind of good inoculum, high diversity, because you don't know exactly what the temperature is going to be in an hour or 2 hours or tomorrow or the next day. You don't know what the moisture is going to be like. You don't know. So you've got to inoculate massive diversity of all these beneficial organisms.
Thanks, Elaine. And there's a kind of a follow-on question to this. I think it's corollary, which is, can compost tea be applied with a conventional sprayer? So can farmers just reuse the equipment that they have to be able to spray something like a compost tea? Anybody want to field that one?
Well,
Go ahead, Elaine.
it's kind of like there's some modifications that you have to make, because in the chemical world, they're trying to pass just the chemical. And so they've got filters on the liquid pathway that filters out everything except for micron sized, 1 micrometer size materials are all that can pass through. And your organisms that you have to have the whole food web on your plant surfaces. Some of them are as large as 150 micrometers. So you want to have openings, or if you leave filters on the liquid pathway, you're going to want to make certain that the opening size of those filters is more like 400 micrometers, so that you can get all of the biology through the system. So we go over the equipment problems in the foundation course number 4. So we're going to be talking about a lot of the sprayers and the water tanks and the compost tea brewers and all those things we will spend time talking about in FC4.
Yeah, I would just mimic what you said. Most of the equipment can be reused with just some minor modifications. Some sprayers, I've had a client that had an electrostatic sprayer that didn't seem to be all too great for the biology. But within most situations, removing the filters, looking at the pump, and the nice thing is that you get the skills to be able to use a microscope to help you make those determinations. We'll make a known good compost tea or extract, take the biology counts, run it through the system, all the different pumps before it finally gets out to the spray, and try to identify, are there any areas where it is having a more than acceptable amount of biological kill? And if it is, then we look to replace those areas. And it just takes a little bit of time just to figure that out. But once you have it figured out, then you have a good spraying system. And And also cleaning your systems too. A lot of the farmers want to use this dual purpose. Some of those that may still be on a fertilization or a chemical type of package, you want to make sure that you're cleaning those sprayers out very well before you put the biology into them, because what's the point?
Really, you
You're just
will
gonna
kill
it.
things. Yep.
Exactly. Now I'm just putting out brown water. Nicholas and Keisha, any other comments to this question?
I was just thinking that it's one of the fun things you get to do once you get the foundation course information is the school really sets you up to understand what you need to look for. But then there are so many different sprayers in the world, so many different situations you have to look at. So, I mean, if you're into detective work, that's part of the fun of application.
Fully. Exactly. And Nicholas, what about you? Do you guys use compost teas?
Yeah, we use compost tea at the beginning, and then it was not quite necessary. After 3 years, we stopped doing it. We had bright biology everywhere. And we use a very simple sprayer that we modified. We just remove all the things inside. Very simple things, really.
Yeah, really, it's just trying to make sure that whatever you're using does as little harm as possible to the biology. And typically for me, it's once you get the filters out of the system, it's just looking at the pump. Some pumps do a lot of damage, other pumps do very minimal damage, and just identifying what pump does your farmer have. And if that's the one thing that needs to get changed out, then that's the modification you probably have to make.
And then realize that the work that you did in the first growing season to get things up and going, get the right biology growing and being present in the soil, and then something else is going to carry it up onto the foliage. So you stop working so hard. Now you finally, as a farmer, you maybe have some free time. Oh my gosh, what are you going to do with that free time? So
more farming.
Yeah, more farming. We're going to add a couple more 1,000 acres.
Yeah. One last thing I just mentioned on sprayers too is one thing we do pay attention to is coverage. Most sprayers have, the principle is that you try to get as much coverage as you can, but we want to make sure that we're inoculating the surface of the leaves, the bark on the trees, both from the underside as well as the top side. And so we'll evaluate and see what kind of a adoption of biology has been, deposited on the surface of those leaves. So we have techniques that we use to be able to do that as well. Okay, anything else on this question before I move on to another one? Okay, this question's from Valerie, and Valerie asks, what is done with the pulp from pressing the olives for oil? So what do you do with the farm residues, Nicholas?
Right, that's called pomace. And because it's a two-phase system, it comes out with quite high humidity. So the trick is to dry it over a season, just outside, and then is turned into pellets that are used for stoves. So it's used to warm up houses, basically.
Oh, so it's like a fuel source for heat.
It's a fuel source, yeah. It can be used in, for energy making as well. It can be used for different things. You can do biochar with it. In our case, it was just easier to just, sold it for pellets. But you can also use it for animal food in certain quantities.
I've always used it as a component in the compost pile.
Yeah, you can do that as well. It's you need all the materials because there's still quite a lot of oil in it, and it's oil is anti bacterial. So of course you need to offset it with other things, but there's many uses. I mean, it's a huge industry, so there's many people that have been thinking about using the pomace. So there's many different ways to valorize it.
Yeah, but I would treat it as a woody material because that oil has quite a wide seed-in ratio typically. So the seed that's left over, it's got a little bit of high nitrogen typically still left in it. So it's got a lot of nutrients. I would, especially small scale growers, probably that's the place where you don't have the amount of material to turn the pumice into another product. So using it to make next year's compost pile, I think is a good way to deal with it as well.
I'm a big fan of that. I think it's important to make compost that has components that come from the crops that you're growing. You know, in the grape industry, we use the pumice from, you know, the stems and the skins and the seeds. And then whenever old grapevines are getting cut out, we're making, you know, chipping it for the woody material into compost piles. We're starting to do some of that with Keisha and Casey and almond production as well, taking the hulls, the shells, the wood chip from, you know, older trees that are probably going to already be inoculated, hopefully, with good biology that are supporting that crop. And now you're introducing that right back into your composting, which I think is really important to do.
Yeah, organic materials that are grown on site are our most valuable resources. I see it. So often I actually have to pay for materials. If there was something just produced nearby, it's such a gift to have.
Yeah,
really. With olive, we have access to a lot of woody material because you need to prune the trees every year.
Yeah.
For production. So you have a lot of that, but you don't really need huge quantity of compost after a while. That's really the beginning. And then once it's established, you don't need to make that much compost. And once you have a nitrogen fixing ground cover, which works, that covers your nitrogen needs for your trees. You know, so you can use a lot of woody material. You have a lot of things growing on spot, you know, especially the ground covers that are really nitrogen rich. And we have access to pig, cow, sheep, rabbits, and goat manure. So all the compost we did was very diverse and using the wood from the things. But after a while, you use it just to inoculate. You know, just like speed up a little bit the biology, but not really to put on every tree.
Oh, great. We got another question here from Caroline, and Caroline says, have you experimented with nitrogen fixing cover crops underneath your trees? And I think you kind of answered that with your last statement, but do you want to expand upon that a little bit more? Yeah, what is your cover cropping, cover planting kind of strategy?
Okay, so the strategy was to use drought-resistant nitrogen-fixing plants, many wild medicagos, basically. And we got those seeds from the seed bank. And then we added to that also alfalfa and fetch, and basically doing a mix. I think beginning we saw about 9 different varieties. And then we had a lot of wild oats as well. They're not nitrogen fixing, but it's more diverse. It's not only nitrogen fixing ground cover. There's a lot of wild plants growing in. Yeah, they are very, very useful.
Yeah, I try to avoid just strictly nitrogen fixing plants as an understory, as a ground cover, because we have gotten situations where we get too much fixation in the soil and you start getting a nitrate response. And that's not what you want. You don't want too much. Nature does everything in balance. And what we as human beings need to understand is what is the balance? And so what is the proper set of microorganisms to be present? What's the proper understory composition? And I have over the years kind of turned away from doing a lot of nitrogen fixing understory plants or ground cover kind of plants, because you can get too much nitrogen pumping into your plants. So good diversity, that's what we're after. And then you have microorganisms that are going to be able to grow under any condition that nature might send you during the course of the year.
Yeah, I look at like you said, Elaine, you know, cover crops or are a multi-tool. They're kind of like the Swiss Army knife. One, you get nitrogen fixation from it. Another, you can get organic matter into the soil. Some of it will help you break up compaction. Also you get a cover on your soil that is going to help with moisture retention and evaporation. And it's having that kind of thought process around what are all the different things that the cover crop or cover plant is going to give to us, and then kind of tailor a diverse set of plants to kind of fill those tools or those needs, I guess.
Yeah,
Nicholas, I cut you off. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Elaine.
We want good cover on the surface of that soil, because when you do get rainfall, especially in a semi-arid kind of part of the world, if any of those raindrops hit the soil surface directly, now all that energy that they're going to release is going to compact soil someplace down deeper in the soil, and that harms all of the plants. So you want to make certain that that raindrop is going to hit the canopy of the ground cover, so that all that energy is released on the surface of the plant instead of on the surface of the soil. We don't get compaction. The water's going to fall, not very far before that drop hits the soil. So it doesn't build up speed, it doesn't have the energy, and it infiltrates immediately and can go down as deep as the root system can go down. Most people have a misunderstanding about how far down roots go. And they're told that root systems, even of trees, don't go down more than 3 feet. And that's absolutely not true. The root systems on olives can go quite deep if the soil's not compacted, if there's plenty of airways and passageways and hallways for oxygen and water and the microorganisms to get into the soil.
Yeah, to add on the cover crops, it's really interesting to see what nature brings to you, and there's a succession as well. When you start in a place where there's nothing, just like wild oats and wild thistle, we had all of those thistle growing, and you look at what they bring to you. Thistle will accumulate a lot of iron, for example. It's one of the few guys that has the capacity of taking that iron in the raw form. So if you compost that guy, then you release that iron. And when your system matures, when your tree grows, then you change the climate of the area. You have shade all of a sudden, and then the more sophisticated fancy plants are coming in. So yeah, succession is very important in cover crop. You start with the spiky pioneers, and then slowly it gets more and more sophisticated.
Yeah, I think
I
that's
was going to
something.
say as well, we're working
ahead,
on a
Keisha.
project right now it's just barren landscape, and the only thing that's growing is thistle. And as soon as we just put, a little bit of mulch on the ground, we start to see these beautiful little delicate flowered, I'm not sure if they're native plants, but seeds that are in the bank coming up. And then once we actually get a cover crop established, it's even more, just almost every week I'm seeing new species pop up, and I didn't plant them there. So it is neat to watch it over time, how it builds and how diversity just grows from seemingly nothing.
We're just lying in wait for
Yes.
Yeah,
the good
exactly.
stuff.
And it's amazing how fast you can change that succession. I had the same experiences with Keisha, which is, you get in some of these agricultural fields, they are really, really beat up. They have denuded of most of the biology. They're highly compacted. And, we'll typically start with a cover crop that's going to be very aggressive in adding organic matter and breaking up compaction and doing those kind of things. But within a year or two of those cover crops, then we transition to more perennial cover plants that they become much easier to adapt and germinate in those soils. And then they are going to be supporters of that cash crop. You're always trying to find what are the understory plants that support the overstory plants, and typically the overstory plant is your cash crop, like a nut or a fruit or a vine or something similar to that. I think it's just being thoughtful. Yeah, go ahead, Elaine.
We always want to emphasize that the cover plants that we're putting down are perennials. You only buy those seeds once, and you spread that out, and then they will produce their own seed. They'll produce runners. They'll you don't ever have to repay to put anything in. So they're really not cover crops because most of our crops are annuals. So we're going for permanent perennial plants, and I like to call them ground plants. Living mulch is another term for perennial. Yep. So great.
All right. I have two questions here. These are related, so I'm going to ask both the questions. I think it makes sense why they're related. But the first question is from Lisa, and it is, how did you go about planting the trees when there's such little topsoil? Do you need to build up the soil first, and how do you do that quickly enough? And then Janet asked the question is, Nicholas, at the olive operation, did you bring in a lot of organic matter? Why or why not?
Okay, so when we planted the trees, well, basically when I arrived in Cyprus, I visited a farm, and I was close by, and the trees were planted 5 years ago in that farm. So it showed me exactly what not to. And those trees were planted with a digger. They did a big hole, and they put a lot of organic matter into that hole, and some manure, some what they call the composted manure, which is basically 3-4 years old manure, which is a typical fertilizer in Cyprus. So it's a pile of manure that sits for 4 years, and then they use that as fertilizer. And then they planted the trees, and that tree was 5 years old, fairly big olive tree, and I managed to take it out of the ground with just one hand. The roots had completely turned around. It was like in a big pot. So I did the right opposite. I drilled small holes with an auger, I think is the name in English. It's like a big drill, which is an add-on on that small tractor. Basically the same diameter of the parts the tree came in, and I just put the tree in the ground. And then whatever else, compost, water, and everything came from the top. So obviously drip irrigation from the top. Usually the drippers are on the drip line, on the edge of the canopy, where the root system, on the edge of the root system. And then we move them away every year to make sure the water is on the edge of the root system, so the root system expands. And then, yes, we did bring a lot of organic matter that we collected in the area in the winter, because you do have a bit of rain and you do have a bit of rain in the winter. We had straw coming from the next door farms. We had lots of different types of manures we were collecting in the villages. We were cleaning the old people rabbit cages and chicken cages and pigeons and pigs and stuff. So we were going around. It was a lot of work at the beginning, to do all this compost, and we were turning it a little bit by hand and it was a tractor. So it was a lot of work at the beginning. It really paid off. And yeah, so we did with whatever we got, basically. Any waste streams that we could find, we composted it and we used it. So we had a really big diversity in our.
I think it's great. I think your diversity of inputs into compost typically results in really good, diverse microorganisms in compost. Keisha, you can probably speak to that in spades because you see it all the time.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically it. Diversity by diversity in our cover crops and our compost ingredients and everything.
Compost was a very unknown thing in Cyprus, a hot compost. People didn't see. And I used to do it by the road on the edge of the farm. And people will see us turning this compost, we do compost in the winter when we do have material. And so it's steaming, it's beautiful, it's steaming. And people were wondering, they really thought we were crazy at the beginning. First of all, to do a farm in that area, thinking that we're going to make money in olives in Cyprus. And then on the second year, they stole our compost. They used to come with the pickup and store compost at night. So we say, yeah, we did it, you know. We're happy.
That's how you know it's good.
Yeah.
Yay, all that work, and somebody just walks off with it in the middle of the night.
The night.
Yeah,
Oh,
but we were happy about it, to be honest. We were very happy about it.
Hopefully they're going to treat it well and use it right. You know, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
They probably need some classes about that. You know, you should. Yeah, I think your eco system, you know, the ecotourism that you're planning in the place you're now working. That's one thing you should be doing, is teaching everybody how to make compost and using it to keep all the trees happy.
Yeah, we actually run courses in Cyprus and stuff, but yeah, we want to train the farmers. What we're trying to achieve is community composting place, you know, because the scale of farming is very small in Cyprus. You know, everyone has a small farm, so it's not easy for everyone to make a big pile of compost.
Well, you can make small size piles, you know, something that's no more than 1.5 meters by high and 1.5 meters wide. And that will usually be all the compost that they need for a small farm.
Yeah, that's how we run our homestead. I can make 1 or 2 compost piles in a year typically, and make enough inoculum for all my extracts and my teas. And you know, we've got quite a large production in the homestead, so you can make the hand turn piles be very effective for small farms, you know, market garden farms, homesteaders, things like that.
You guys are missing the point of how much fun it is to compost as a community, and the diversity that all the community members can bring to the piles.
Sure.
It's superior, I think.
Yeah. Well, that's what you're working on right now, right, Keisha?
It is.
You're doing that. Yeah, exactly.
It is.
I think that's fantastic.
I wonder why she would bring it up.
I'm not plugging anything here. Come on.
You know, in our case, we have a cultural issue with compost. First of all, they don't know what it is, and they are used to burn whatever, you know, material they have. So the traditional thing is just burn it. And if you tell them that you have to turn it with a fork, it will just laugh at you. So you have to do a bit. You have to do a bit first, and then have them to try it. You know, and then get the ball rolling.
Yeah,
education is key.
Yeah, give away some of your compost and have them report back to the community what happened when they used it.
Yeah, it's true. That's our best tool for promoting this work is word of mouth. It's crazy what people, you know, they're not doing all the evaluations with the microscope that we're doing, but they see these crazy differences and then report back to all their friends, and before you know it, it's the hot new thing.
Yeah, everybody wants it. Exactly. Yeah. Okay, I got a question for you here. This is from Rodney, but actually I think there's been a few questions in the Q&A chat around this, which is, Nicolas, was there more to the presence of rabbits in the olive groves? You referred to them in your slideshow. So what's up with the rabbits?
All right, it was a big increase actually, and it was an issue in the first year because we didn't really understood. We planted the trees, and then we've seen rabbits starting peeling off the bark of the tree, and in the summer. So then we realized they were just a bit thirsty. So we're starting putting clay pots under some drippers. And so there was always a bit of water there and there. And then, you know, frame stopped. And it was the same with the rats, basically, in the irrigation, just to find water. And yeah, they did increase. And then the fox population increased. It's an issue in Cyprus because people do poison the fox because they think they will have more rabbits. And they have basically rabbits. And so we're trying to monitor that and to try to stop people from doing this, because I know very well from my experience in France when I was a kid, and they start poisoning fox all over the place. And then, you know, shortly after, the rabbit disappeared because there was no one to take the sick rabbits out of the gene pool, and myxomatoes came in. And you know, it's always a matter of balance, as we say in nature. But yeah, we do have a lot. And it's a
Yeah,
UN zone, so there's no hunting normally.
yeah, I find that kind of you talked about, kind of balancing the ecosystems. It is amazing how fast when you start to not interrupt some of those ecological balances, how fast it will get into equilibrium. You get to a spot of, hey, I've got gophers. All right, well, they can be really problem, but if you create an ecosystem that's good for raptors and for snakes and other things, they'll control that rodent problem. And I don't want to see all the gophers go away, because then it's not going to feed the predators of rodents. So a small population of them is totally fine. You're not going to lose any kind of significant amount of production. It will be very, very minimal. I think once people really start to internalize getting an equilibrium in your ecosystems is super important. And it's really not that hard to do as long as you're observing well.
Yeah, it's such a potent part of the work that we do, mentioning those the clay pots underneath the drip system. That is such an easy fix to rodents. I never even considered that with rabbits. I actually took a note because we have rabbits here that are really being demonized right now, and I'm like, they just want water. But you mentioned about the birds as well, and just creating the rock stacks and then bringing them in. Working with the expanded soil food web is just another tool we have that just really exponentially helps us grow our microbes out, not only being taxis, but stopping them from being pests. I mean, bunnies aren't so bad if they're not chewing the cambium layer off all your trees every spring or every summer.
Yeah, and it's incredible how fast they come back. In our experience, it was really bad. The first thing were the insects start coming back, start buzzing, really start buzzing. And then the birds, and Cyprus is on the migratory route, there's many migratory birds coming to Cyprus. And it's incredible when the birds start to come in, the noise, the beauty of it, and, the free fertilization and the spreading of seeds. And then, yeah, snakes, owls. We did put nest boxes for owls, the barn owl, and then it came in. One owl will eat 1,000 rodents in 1 year. So
and they'll happily do it for you too.
Yeah. and yeah, it goes really fast. Our solution is always to add life. We don't have any enemies. If you have enemies, that's all you can see. We don't have enemies.
Yeah.
We're just adding life.
It really enriches the work environment as well, I imagine.
Yeah.
When you start working somewhere so desolate and without life, to actually watch that start to come in it's enriching for your own work as well.
No doubt. Yeah, it's also, for me here in my homestead, I used to worry about, oh my gosh, aphids or spider mites, or name your pest du jour, and the amount of energy I spent worrying about it and trying to combat it. And now I just don't even think about it. I mean, it's the craziest thing. I'll see some aphids on a plant. I'll just walk by it and go, okay, fine. Because I know within another day or two, the lacewings will be in there, the ladybugs will be in there, and the aphids will be gone. It will be controlled. And it's just an amazing amount of stress relief not to actually have to worry about those things constantly.
That's funny, Brian. We moved into a new house and I put in a little vegetable garden in the front yard, and there was just no life at all. And I came out one day and I had hornworms on my tomatoes and I had aphids, and I cheered. I was like, there's life. And I knew that I've changed. I've changed deeply to cheer for aphids. I was like, yes, this means there's more coming.
Yep, exactly. The ladybugs will be right around the corner. Okay, let's take a look at another question. This question's from Lynn, and Lynn asks, Nicolas, are you seeing a microclimate shift in the area with more rain or smaller temperature shifts?
Could you repeat that?
Sure, no problem. So the question's from Lynn, and Lynn says, Nicolas, are you seeing a microclimate shift in the area with more rain or smaller temperature shifts?
Microclimate on temperatures, yes, because shade and more humidity and more transpiration from the plants. So yes, a big change in local microclimate. In rain, I think we're too small to have an impact. If we were to put this in much larger scale, yes, we will see a difference. As a farmer, I look a lot at the weather and the satellite, like everyone else. And what happened often is like you see the clouds coming, they go over the tallest mountain, and then they split out when they reach that big flat plain, because it's a massive plain which has no plant growing on it, and it's much hotter, the soil, because there's nothing growing on it, so it creates that hot air, and so you can see the cloud splitting, it's like going on north and south and reaching for the sea. So I think if we were to seriously use proper agriculture in a much larger scale on the island, we see a difference in the water cycle. Yes, sure.
Yeah, Keisha or Elaine, anything else you want to add to the microclimate shifts that you guys see?
I mean, same experience. I would like to say that we've done projects that actually make it rain, but the experience I've had is just, building a food forest, putting in a canopy layer. You're going to feel a huge temperature shift as you walk from the arid part of the property into that shady, moist environment. You can feel it on your skin. You can see the temperature difference on a thermometer. But in even times we've seen springs come back, below where the trees were planted, but haven't actually seen the climate change yet because of it. I think we need more people doing this on a larger scale. I think Nicolas is right. If agriculture as a whole would transition over into this, we would probably see amazing changes, but that's the work we have ahead of us. So let's get to work.
Doing some of the work with eco camps that from John DeLue's organization. They are affecting weather patterns. But they're taking whole valleys, whole watersheds where it's 1,000 or 1,000 hectares, 2,000 hectares that they're remediating, if you will. And there you see climate change, or you see changes in local weather. Now we have to keep expanding the amount of land that we convert over. And so larger projects have to be done. Working on that angle.
Are you talking about the project in China that
Yes.
John Liu did? I was just reading about that. Very interesting
amazing
work.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he's developed eco camps all around the world, where that's basically what they're doing, is they're starting with a small area and trying to expand out to have those kinds of effects on whole valleys, on large parts of the planet. So all of us working together will do it. Now, could we do it in the next year or two?
Let's get it together, guys.
Yeah, right. It took us how many years to destroy it? Can we at least have 5 years to put it back?
To graduate the Soil Food Web School, you have to regenerate 1,000 acres of land.
That's it.
Just move the bar up, guys. Sorry.
Yeah, one thing I would say too is that there's good ways that you can, in a micro setting, like on a farm, show your farmers or show other folks the changes you can make that can be pretty dramatic. One of my farmers went out to, I think it was his father's uncle's property, where they saw very bare floors underneath their nut trees. And it was a very hot day in California, and he was showing surface temperatures of like 130, 140 degrees. It was crazy hot, in these raceways. And then he went to his farm where he has cover plants, and it was, I think, like 80, 85 degrees.
Wow.
And so you could see massive differences. And so that's something you can internalize very quickly. Another thing is moisture retention. bare soils evaporate so much more moisture. Have farmer that had bare soil underneath their trees, but they had cover crops in their raceways, and the massive amount of moisture retention in that soil was huge from in where we had a bunch of cover plants versus where we had bare soil. And so those are some things that you can make some quick observations to say, yeah, that is a significant difference. Okay, I think we take one more question and then we'll wrap this webinar up. And this question is kind of a good softball toss to us, but it's from Carl, which is, biodiversity is key to regenerative agriculture and sustainability. Any thoughts? Plenty of thoughts on this. Anybody want to take this one?
It's like, since becoming a composter and really focusing on diversity, when I'm driving down the road, I find myself just looking at everyone's yard, assessing what they're doing with their organic material, judging it, and then trying to figure out a way to collect it.
Yeah, exactly.
We're obsessed with diversity on another level.
How do we figure out how to get that guy to buy a truck so he can take his organic matter to our operation? The daily pickup of materials. And it's like in the fall here, I go around to collect people's leaves from their, just load it up here in my wheelbarrow, and I will take it over to my composting area, and I'll turn it into good compost. And if I took 20 pounds from you, then I will give you 2 pounds back of compost at the end of the year.
The neighbor's giving you a funny look as you empty their green bin into the back of your truck.
Did you want this?
I'm gonna take it.
Yeah. You don't mind if I walk off with it? I'll bring back
microbes.
Can't you hear them calling?
But yeah, I think biodiversity is key. And this is a question that I always kind of wrestle with, which is, in the conventional and even in organic systems, there's a lot of monoculture. It is a crop that's grown over hundreds, sometimes thousands of acres. And I think there's ways that we can help regenerative systems by introducing diversity of cover plants, those things that are in the understory, not just plant one type of understory plant, but multiple types. Getting farmers to recognize that putting in hedgerows every so often, maybe losing a little bit of their land to have insectatories that can harvest or provide habitat for all those beneficial insects and so forth. And eventually, I think we might see larger shifts. There's folks like Mark Shepard who are out there doing kind of permaculture style agriculture in orchard crops, with mixing of different trees, having larger raceways where they're growing other crops in those raceways and things like that. I think in the long haul, regenerative agriculture may look a lot different from our monoculture conventional agriculture.
Yep, and we want to be getting that diversity back into the soil, because you don't know what the weather is going to be like this summer or this fall or next spring. And so you have to have those communities that present, waiting for the right conditions for them to grow. And you just keep adding to that diversity. We don't have to put a genus species name on every single creature that's in your soil. When you think about the fact that we have identified 5,000 species of bacteria, but the current estimation for the number of species of bacteria on this planet is over 1 billion. We haven't even begun to scratch the surface of understanding what all those different bacterial species do. Same thing for fungi, same things for protozoa and for nematodes and for microarthropods and earthworms and incatraids, and just keep going. All of that food web, we want to get the right diversity. And right now, the only thing we can do logically, economically, is just to maximize diversity.
Could you imagine what it would be like if all the large scale agriculture that it is monoculture by nature, but by getting in that diverse species of low growing plants, it's effectively not a monoculture anymore, and it turns into more of a microbial bank. So these farmers that were getting demonized before are now really the heroes because they're the landholders, and they're putting the focus into the microbes, which you can only assume are rapidly disappearing from the planet. Everything else is going extinct. If our insects are leaving, so are our microbes. So and we could really change the game on this and do a lot of good if we could just shift thinking a little bit and practices.
We need more heroes like Nicolas.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Well, I know. Diversity brings stability. It brings stability in your soil. It brings stability in your system. It brings stability in your body. Your gut microbiome, and your skin microbiome, and your brain microbiome. It brings stability in your community too. And that's the difficult bit. All the rest, it's easy. The biology is pretty easy. And the design is pretty easy. And the people is the part.
Yeah, for sure. Always
A
the
little,
case. Yeah.
a little more challenging.
For sure.
That'll be in a masterclass later.
Yeah, we definitely can be our own worst enemies. That's for sure. So Alex, if you want to share out the last slide, which is going to just be a little bit of a promo for our 2 remaining webinars in this promotional series. So we have webinar 3, which is how to rapidly regenerate your soil, and that will be at 11 a.m. Pacific time on Thursday, October 21st. And then we'll have webinar 4, which is going to be Meet the Soil Regen Pros, and that's going to be at 2 p.m. Pacific time on Thursday, October 28th. So we hope to see you guys here and continue to get educated, and also continue to ask really great questions for our panelists so that we can actually have a good conversation. At this point, I'd like to thank all the people that are working behind the scenes. You wouldn't believe that it takes quite a few folks to be able to pull all these promotions and webinars off. So I'd like to thank everybody working behind the scenes. Without you guys, this webinar would definitely not go nearly successful. And then I'd like to thank the panelists today, Keisha, Nicolas, and Elaine, for providing just great information and, keeping a very lively conversation going. So thank you, everybody.
Well, thank you, Brian, for
Yes,
being
thank you,
host.
Brian.
You've done a
Thank
great
you,
job.
Brian.
Thank you, Nicolas. Everyone.
Yes, Nicolas, that was
No
Bye,
good.
Thank you, Keisha.
All right, everybody. I hope to see you at the next webinar. Bye.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.